Epic Games had a pretty good 2018, mostly thanks to Fortnite. It brought in almost $2.5 billion in 2018 alone. So what do you do with a breakout game that nets you billions a year? You take some risks and try something new, and that's exactly what Tim Sweeney and Epic Games did. Epic Games Store was officially announced on December 4th, 2018 in a blog post by Tim Sweeney, CEO of Epic Games. It was a pretty promising announcement. Right off the bat, Sweeney seemed to show that EGS was for both the developer and the consumer. Developers saw a much better 88-12 cut compared to Steam's 70-30 cut of revenue and had better ease of access to their consumers. Another feature talked about was Support a Creator, a program where players could refer an affiliated creator when buying a game, and Epic would cover a 5% revenue share with the creator from that purchase. This was exciting for a lot of people. There was finally legitimate competition waged against Steam, whose owners had grown stagnant and had their own share of controversies within their storefront. A competing storefront would be exactly the type of thing to push Valve into becoming active again. I was totally on board when Epic Games Store was announced. As mentioned just now, a competing storefront might actually have Valve make games again. Real games. Me and my friends were ready for its release and to see the emerging storefront wars. Just a few days later, on December 8th, the store launched. To say it failed to meet expectations would be kind of an understatement. What many people were greeted with was a barren storefront deprived of bare necessities, with the worst yet to come. Steam, Uplay. Amazon, cool math games. These 5 storefronts share something in common that Epic Games doesn't have. A shopping cart. The Epic Games Store launched with no shopping cart. It's like a grocery store opening and you could only buy one thing at a time, but be sure not to buy too many things too frequently, lest you be marked as fraudulent. A plethora of other features were missing, including bundles, achievements, gifting, reviews, which we'll come back to, forums, and wish lists. Individually, it's alright to be missing 1 or 2 of these features. However, Epic Games Store had established themselves as Steam competitors, but couldn't even touch them in terms of features, something users care a lot about. Exclusives have never been a welcome process, but most people have come to terms with it. They're used to push sales of a company's console typically. If exclusives weren't a thing, then the hardware and gaming scene as a whole would probably look drastically different. Some people see exclusives as a necessary evil. I'm one of those people. When a game is an exclusive, it's usually announced as an exclusive. That makes sense, right? It keeps things clear and concise. It's not like a game would just become an exclusive and be taken off of its primary storefront like 2 weeks before its release, right? It's not like pre-orders were already being taken for a game and it just pulls itself from that platform. That's ridiculous. Who would do that? As of 28th January 2019, Metro Exodus is now available to purchase through the Epic Games Store and has been removed from other digital stores, including Steam. Metro started out on PC and has been largely viewed as a PC series. Despite this, Metro Exodus's majority of sales took place on consoles instead of PC, but I'm sure that's unrelated. Shenmue 3 also has a similar tale to tell. Instead of weeks, however, it was now months before release. To compensate for having more notice, the promise to its backers of a Steam release would be broken. On top of this, the publisher refused to offer refunds. Credit where credit is due. Epic Games did offer and cover the refunds for the backers. Well, how about games already being sold and having an established fan base on Steam? Surely something like that wouldn't get yoinked from the shelves, right? No, not yet at least. On May 1st, Epic Games acquired the studio behind Rocket League, Psyonix. In their announcement post for it, they assure nothing will change in the short run. The editor's note, however, is rather vague and a bit discouraging. Rocket League is and remains available on Steam. Anyone who owns Rocket League through Steam can still play it and can look forward to continued support. Thanks! A lot of people took that as the game would eventually become an EGS exclusive at a later point in time. As of the time of writing, the game is still available to purchase on Steam. One of my favorite exclusives to talk about is The Division 2. It isn't really an exclusive, just a game not made available on Steam. it could still be bought on Uplay. The reason I enjoy this so much is because Ubisoft stated the second division's sales were in line with the first division's on PC. With this in mind, Ubisoft also confirmed the Division 2 sold 10 times better on Uplay than the first game. It's a pretty good indicator of how consumers feel about the Epic Games Store, especially since a lot of people hated Uplay pretty much since it released. But again, I'm sure this too is unrelated to people not wanting to use the Epic Games Store. Exclusives are really meant to showcase something. They are oftentimes used to showcase a console's power or the studio's talent. There's method behind the madness. But what's Tim trying to show off? There's no hardware to show off. None of the studios are actually owned by Epic Games. They're showing off nothing. All they're doing here is trying to force people to use the Epic Games Store. Tim made his intentions clear when he wrote, "If Steam committed to a permanent 88% revenue share for all developers and publishers without major strings attached, Epic would hastily organize a retreat from exclusives while honoring our partner commitments and consider putting our own games on Steam." He followed it up by acting like what he's doing is in the interest for the industry as a whole. Don't misconstrue my words. A bigger revenue share to developers is, without a doubt, an amazing thing. However, to use this as leverage is a sort of scummy thing to do. In this context, he seems to have only done the 88-12 split primarily as a pressure play towards Steam rather than a contribution to developers. For a publisher to turn around and remove a game that was promised on one platform in favor of another, then the price must be high, right? In the case for Control, the exclusivity price that Epic Games paid was about $10.45 million, where the developers saw 55% and the publishers saw 45% of that money. For a single game, Tim Sweeney was willing to pay $10.5 million in an attempt to get people over to his storefront. The cut, though, seems pretty unbalanced. 55-45 seems hardly fair to the developers who put in most of the work for the game. Kind of shocking he'd let that happen when he's been adamantly fighting Steam on their own industry standard share that they've since changed to favor developers. I've talked a lot about exclusivities. I know. The thing is that a lot of resistance towards the Epic Games Store comes from their anti-consumer practices of throwing loads of money for exclusivity. They're giving the consumer and the developers less choices. Steam is a massive digital storefront, the biggest one in PC gaming. Most developers want to publish there, but development money is typically an issue. Isn't it sort of manipulative to approach struggling developers and give them money only if they forfeit their game to your store? Most developers won't say no. In doing so, however, Tim has now turned an entire studio into a pawn in a very polarizing game that is favored heavily against them. The money is great short term, but something like this sticks with the developers long term. What happened with Metro Exodus will be remembered for years to come. Same with Shenmue. It doesn't magically go away. The unfortunate part is that a case like Metro Exodus is the fault of the publishers, not the developers. Alright. So they've had a rocky first year. Let's look into the future. There's a nice Trello page set up to see what the Epic Games Store has in plan and what it wants to do in a certain time frame. It was once split up into 3 categories. Near term, which covered 1 to 3 months, mid-term, which covered 4 to 6 months, and long-term being over 6 months. However, those categories have now been condensed into up next and future development. Before being condensed, shopping carts were a long-term goal. Over 6 months for a shopping cart. Amazing. Other things in that same category were achievements and gifting. An interesting feature currently in future development is user reviews. That feature alone isn't interesting, that's quite common. It's the fact that they're going to be opt-in for the developers. While Steam has recently implemented a good defense against review bombing, Epic Games just gives the developers the option to not even let people review their games. There's no immediate and convenient way to see how other people feel about the game. Epic Games also had an interesting sale, dubbed Epic Mega Sale. It came just before Steam's summer sale and was a store-wide deal. Essentially, if you bought a game that was more than $14.99, you got a cool $10 off. Pretty nice, right? For consumers, sure, but not publishers and developers. While reviews will be opt-in, this sale was not. It came out of nowhere, and the only way to not participate in it was to pull your game from the entire store for the sale's duration, which some publishers did. The problem was that games that could be pre-ordered in the sale were being devalued before they even launched. As a result, some games actually hiked up their prices. While Epic did say they were willing to pay the difference, publishers still pulled their games. Epic Games has had years and years of other storefronts to look at, but they seemingly kept their head in the ground and did what they wanted. It hasn't worked out so far by the looks of it. Since its release, Epic Games Store has been shrouded in controversy, most of which are true, but some false rumors have slipped in. Only time will tell if Tim's smug attitude will work. Hopefully they'll figure out how a shopping cart works. For now, however, that's been the messy history of the Epic Games Store so far. Hey everyone, I'm Vinyl Sprackle, and I really hope you enjoyed the video. I know I enjoyed researching it and making, writing, voicing, editing it, all of it. So if you enjoyed the video, it'd mean a lot if you were to share, like, comment, do whatever. These videos take a lot of time and effort to make, and eventually I'd like to be able to reasonably set aside more time to making these videos. So helping me get my name out there just a little bit helps way more than you know.